Growing up in the 1950s, that supposedly traditional family decade, I was one of a number of young boys who were recipients of a great variety of hair curling procedures, including permanent waves. In addition to receiving home permanents, I often spent hours after school, on the weekends, or going to bed in the evenings, with my hair set in pin curls, or with clips or on rollers. It was not unusual for Mom, my sisters and me to be around the house with our set hair covered with hairnets and sometimes those frilly sleep caps. From the time I was about 5 years old until I turned 13, I underwent perming and setting on a regular basis. The most unforgettable of those permanents led me and my best friend, a guy who was a real pal, to an even stranger experience. My mom experimented on me with a great variety of little girl permanents, youthful versions of adult home perms. I endured having a perm every 2 to 4 months, depending upon what type she used on me. Some of the cheaper perms did not last as long as others. My mother was not a hairdresser. She was a traditional stay-at-home mom, raising 2 daughters and a son, me the youngest of the 3. My dad worked in heavy construction, traveling all over the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. He made very good money which he always sent home. But he was away for long periods of time. Like many women of that decade, Mom absolutely loved to experiment with hair, her own, my sister's hair, mine, my grandmother's, and my aunt's hair as well. In our neighborhood, the culture of beauty meant a lot to women like my mom, my grandmothers, and my aunts. Women had permanents in beauty shops, which could be found on every corner, or gave permanents to each other in their homes all the time. Women experimented constantly with cosmetics, perfumes, nail polish, facial creams, and other beauty treatments. This was also the time when hair coloring, dye was becoming a taboo word, was starting to come into common use by more women concerned about a youthful appearance. Not a week went by without somebody my mother, sisters, aunts or other relatives, friends, grandmothers or neighbors getting or giving a permanent wave, a new hairstyle, manicure, pedicure, facial or beauty treatment of some sort at home or in a beauty shop. Having a permanent wave or other beauty treatment was not a casual thing. It was a beauty event that took place regularly and not just on special occasions. Women talked about beauty and fashion, and called each other on the phone. Permanents were extra special, not merely a perm but rather a permanent wave and not merely something women just did for fun. My mom and her friends and neighbors gave tremendous thought about having a permanent wave. My Aunt Carol was my favorite aunt. She wasn't married yet. She was Mom's youngest sister, worked as a nurse in a doctor's office, and lived close to us. She was as interested in hair as Mom. The two of them read women's magazines by the dozens and were always experimenting with different hairstyles. When it was my turn to be permed, Aunt Carol took the lead while my mom helped by passing to Aunt Carol the plastic curler rods and the end papers which my dear aunt wound, very firmly, onto my head. Originally, I was not sure of the reasons why my mother decided to curl my hair. Granted, I was the only male, since Dad traveled almost year-round in a house of females, with aunts, grandmothers, and lots of girl cousins around all the time. Mom usually explained that perming and setting were necessary to control my thick and unruly hair. Looking back at pictures, my hair was longish by those standards, but lots of new rock and roll stars of the late 1950s were starting to make such hair more popular. Being mannerly and polite, I knew better than to refuse anything Mom told me to do. Spanking or loss of privileges was just not worth getting angry or resentful. Mom repeatedly said I needed a permanent as other youngsters needed braces for their teeth or glasses for their eyes. She believed for the longest time that I simply could not go through life unless she permed and styled my hair. Her attitude made me feel that if my hair was not curled, people would think badly of me or that I came from an uncaring and slovenly family. As a result of this particular permanent wave, I eventually learned more about Mom's attitude and the whys and wherefores. My mom, my sisters, both of my grandmothers and my Aunt Carol never teased or pestered me about getting a permanent or having my hair set. The women in my life understood the need of privacy and keeping my hairstyling a secret from friends. They always helped to make excuses for me about why, at times, I couldn't come out to play or go to a friend's house, to the movies or to a ball game. Aunt Carol created several basic hairstyles for me to wear. They were modified girl styles, which fit me and looked quite natural, and, other than having longer hair than most boys in my age group, nothing much was said. She cut and trimmed my hair at home. The downside, of course, was that a haircut meant I'd be going to bed in curlers and a hairnet, or, worse, the time was at hand soon for another permanent wave session. With curls, I never had to carry a comb at school, and when taking off my hat or ball cap, my hair just sprang into place. The constant routine of hair perming and setting kept the suspicious nature down, with even my closest friends. I remember any number of my teachers, all of them women, neighbor ladies and women at church, telling me how lucky I was to have such nice, naturally curly hair. The exception to friends not sharing my secret was my best friend at the time, Tommy Harrison. He was the only child of a well-to-do widow in our neighborhood. He and I attended the same school and the same church and played on the same community baseball team. All of my friends never saw me in curlers or being permed. If they had, I probably would have been teased unmercifully or beaten up or ridiculed to death, and certainly would have been forced to leave my church and my school, if anybody had ever known. But Tommy was my best friend, a real pal. We told each other secrets and pledged to die under torture rather than tell anyone else. I had told Tommy about having permanents and having my hair set periodically. His eyes bugged out and he admitted that he was glad that his mom did not do those things to him. But until that fateful spring day in 6th grade, he had not seen me undergoing that feminine ritual that women and girls went through, having my hair done just like my mom and sisters. Tommy was a skinny, somewhat shy kid and I was his best friend, though he got along well with girls because he was smart and though skinny, he could knock a pitch out of the park where we played baseball. He and I also shared interest in puppets. From as far back as I could remember, I had all kinds of puppets: hand puppets, string puppets, sock puppets, and just about every other kind imaginable. Tommy and I made puppets, created puppet theaters, wrote scripts, and acted them out. We were never bored. Of course, that interest made us different from most other boys, so we were glad to talk to and work with each other. As I said, we were real pals to each other. We had vivid imaginations. Our puppet plays made our mothers, my aunts, sisters, and cousins laugh. Our theatrical talents usually got us involved both at school and at church in whatever dramatic productions were being done. He and I played the speaking angel parts in the church Christmas pageant for 4 years running. The day of the infamous permanent was a rainy Friday at the end of March. I was 11 years old. Tommy and I were in 6th grade, Mrs. Foster's class. It was a day off from school because all the teachers were attending some sort of teachers' conference. Mom surprised me the night before by telling me that the next morning she and Aunt Carol would give me a permanent wave. Usually, she gave me several days' notice in advance, telling me when busy setting me in curlers that my hair was not gripping the rollers properly enough and it was time for another permanent. Or I'd be with her when she purchased a permanent wave kit at the local drugstore, to my private embarrassment, because I knew that one was for me, not one of my sisters. This particular time, it was a total shock when Mom announced rather casually after supper on Thursday evening that she planned on giving me a permanent the next morning. Like most kids, I had already figured things to do on my day off of school. Tommy and I had talked about being over at his house to work with our puppets, watch television, maybe play catch and have lunch together. When my mom changed my plans for me, I called him and, fearful of telling him the truth, I said that we had to cancel because Mom had planned chores for me at home. After he pestered me about doing something later on Friday, I said that I'd call him if I got finished early. I knew that wouldn't happen. I was going to spend all day Friday in perm curlers, then in rollers, pins and a hairnet. The perming ritual took place in the kitchen. Mom and Aunt Carol had a high backless chair which they called the beauty stool. Whoever was having the permanent mom, aunt, sister, grandmother or me sat on the beauty stool wearing a big plastic cape, fastened at the back by drawstring and usually a big hair clip as well. Aunt Carol always placed newspaper on the floor under the beauty stool to catch any spills of the potent perming lotion. This day I was the lucky customer receiving Aunt Carol's beauty ministrations as my mom ably assisted her. In addition to the oversized plastic cape, Aunt Carol had a towel tucked into the cape around my neck. In anticipation of the application of the smelly perm solution, I held another big towel in my lap. Under the cape, I wore a scruffy old shirt, blue jeans and sneakers. As I waited for Aunt Carol to finish winding my hair on the left side of my head, I knew from past experience she only had to do the frontal part of my crown and bangs before I was free for a few minutes to stand up, briefly walk around and to go to the bathroom. After the short break came the worst part, the terrible application of perming solution. My eyes and nose were already remembering past permanence. I dreaded what was soon to come. I sat quietly as Mom handed perm curlers and end papers to Aunt Carol and she finished wrapping the last curlers into my bangs. Suddenly we heard knocking on the front door. My mom went to the front door and found Tommy, who had ridden his bike, in the rain, to my house. He wanted to see me so badly that he said he came to volunteer to help me with my chores so that we could have some time to play. He adamantly declared he could not leave without seeing me and was willing to help me with my chores. When Mom told him I could not come out, he said he would wait. He asked again if he could help me do my chores. Telling Tommy to wait in the living room, Mom came back into the kitchen, saying, "Well, Peter, what should I do about Tommy?" Bashfully, I admitted that last year I had confided my terrible secret to him and that he had kept faith with me. I felt badly that he biked over in the rain to help me with chores and that basically he had no one else to play with him. "Can you stand having him see you like this?" Mom asked, nodding toward my head covered my multiple perm curlers. I blushed and said I wasn't sure. Aunt Carol, always a very wise woman, said, "Let me call Linda." Linda Harrison was Tommy's mom. She, Aunt Carol and my mom, Rita Stowe, were pretty friendly. If Tommy decides to stay and visit, I have an idea that will guarantee his continuing to keep the secret. Aunt Carol had a sly grin on her face. I did not know at the time what a conspirator was. Aunt Carol stepped into the dining room, picked up an extension phone and called Tommy's mom. Neither Tommy in the living room nor I in the kitchen could hear the 10-minute conversation. When she came back into the kitchen, she grinned like a Cheshire cat. "Well, Linda says if Tommy wants to stay and watch, that's okay with her. She will make sure that he keeps this secret. So, Peter, do you mind being seen by your best friend while you have your permanent wave?" I felt foolish and embarrassed, but also I felt badly for Tommy, little realizing what Mrs. Harrison and Aunt Carol had just cooked up. And what that would eventually lead to for me and my real pal. "It's okay, I guess, if he really, really wants to stay. I trust him to keep a secret. But maybe the smell and curlers and stuff will send him home. But if he wants to come in, well, let him," I answered. Both Mom and Aunt Carol realized that for me, there was nothing more embarrassing than having my closest friend, my best pal, seeing me in such a vulnerable, girlish position, receiving a girl's permanent wave. Aunt Carol quickly wrapped a towel around my head in a turban style, covering the curlers all over my head. Aunt Carol went into the living room and told Tommy that we're doing Peter's hair. She left no doubt that I would not be able to come out the rest of the day. He did not know Aunt Carol very well and asked again to see me. As my aunt led him into the kitchen, he clearly understood what was going on. At once, he could smell the odor of the waving lotion, which Mom was getting ready for Aunt Carol to saturate my perm curlers. He recognized the familiar odor of the lotion of somebody getting a permanent. When he saw me as he came into the kitchen, with the towel wrapped around my head, and saw the curlers and other hairstyling items on the table, he knew what they were doing to me. He spotted the little girl's Ton-at-Home permanent box sitting on the table and fixed his eyes on it. He said with surprise, "Oh, wow, I didn't know you were getting a permanent, Peter. I thought they were just cutting your hair. So this is what you told me about last year? Gosh. Are you okay?" He didn't sound obnoxious or nasty, just genuinely surprised. I just shook my head yes. I blushed a deep red and felt embarrassed, knowing that if he stayed, he would see me undergo the worst parts of the permanent. "Now Tommy," my mom said, "Peter's Aunt Carol talked to your mother. And I have talked to Peter. You may stay and visit and have lunch with us if you like. After Peter's permanent wave has processed, you two may play here in the house. However, you must promise never to tell anyone about Peter getting a permanent. Is that a deal? Can you do that for your friend? If so, you are welcome to stay." "Yes, Mrs. Stowe, I can do that. Peter's my best friend. I never told anyone before and I sure won't now." "Thank you, ma'am," Tommy answered. When Aunt Carol took the towel off my head, Tommy's eyes widened as he stared at my head covered with perm curlers. At Mom's instruction, I got off the beauty stool to use the bathroom before being subjected to the terrible stink and feel of the waving solution. With my head fully encased in curler rods, I walked past Tommy to get to the bathroom. The permanent curlers always felt strange to wear. Unlike rollers, but more like bobby pins, the permanent wave curlers held tightly to my head, my hair wound neatly and smoothly onto the colorful rods. I did not particularly like the pink ones but realized they were just part of it. Mom and Aunt Carol used a collection of various home and professional rods. Before going back to submit to the torment of the application of smelly solution, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, admiring what I saw and then reminding myself that being a boy, I must surely look strange to my pal. Yet my mother, our neighbors, ladies at church, my grandmother, we all seemed to wear our curler rods much the same, with little difference. I just looked like one of the girls. I returned to the kitchen, sat down again on the beauty stool and watched the look of amazement on Tommy's face as Aunt Carol refastened the plastic cape around me and prepared to put me through the agony of the permanent wave solution. Aunt Carol poured the smelly lotion into the plastic applicator. The odor made Tommy and me both wince. But it was worse for me because that potent stuff was about to go on my head. Mom held the plastic tray to the back of my head to catch the drips as, with my head downwards, Aunt Carol began soaking the back curlers on my neck. My eyes started tearing up as Aunt Carol began to work on the right side of my head. Even though Mom caught the drips in the curved tray, the stench of the solution made me cry a few tears. Mom managed to wipe my eyes with a tissue. In another moment, I began to wheeze from the pungent fragrance. Aunt Carol tilted my head back as Mom put the tray against my forehead and I covered my eyes with the towel. She soaked all of the front curlers. I felt the liquid starting cool and then getting warmer. To use all of the lotion, Aunt Carol doused all of my perm curlers with a second application. There was no easy way of getting through the waving lotion. The drenching of my curlers seemed to go on endlessly. As she worked at using all of the lotion until there was none left, Aunt Carol explained to Tommy how long this process would take and then we could play together. After I have all of this lotion on Peter's head, we have to let it process. Then we rinse out the lotion and let the permanent neutralize. Then Peter's hair has to be styled, with some rollers and pins. So you see, Tommy, why this takes so long. Tommy continued to watch intently, saying that he thought had never seen anybody actually getting a permanent before, but had known about them from his mom going to the beauty parlor. He did not seem to grasp the time and steps involved in receiving a permanent wave. I didn't know, until Peter told me, that boys got permanents. But after he told me, I read about some singers and an actor on Broadway that get permanents. Well, now you know, my mother said. A permanent wave gives hair more body, more curl, and makes your hair easier to brush and style. Would like to have a permanent sometime, Tommy? She asked pointedly. No, ma'am, I don't think so, my pal answered. That smell is something awful. I think Peter is brave to go through this. I'm glad that I don't have to. Aunt Carol gave Mom a knowing kind of look that I didn't understand until later. When she had completed the saturation of my entire head, Aunt Carol said, "Okay, Peter, you're finished for a while." Finally, the drenching was over. Though it had only been minutes, it felt like hours under the influence of the wetness and the intense odor on my tightly secured curlers. As I opened my eyes, Tommy was standing, looking at me with a melancholy face. He seemed sympathetic and compassionate. He said softly, "I couldn't go through something like this, Peter. Glad it's you, not me." My mother said, "Well, Tommy, some things are a little worth suffering. Someday you may have a similar experience. Do you still want to stay?" "Yes, ma'am. Peter's my best pal. And maybe later, can we play with our puppets and work on some new skits?" "Yes, Tommy. But it will be a while yet. After the permanent wave solution has worked, we'll rinse Peter's hair with water. Then we have to let the permanent process for a few hours. And then Peter's Aunt Carol will set his hair," my mom explained as Aunt Carol had. "Set? You mean like on curlers, like they use on my mom at the beauty shop?" he asked in surprise. "Yes, like that. They're rollers. I could put your hair up on rollers when I do Peter's set, Tommy. Would you like that?" "Would you like to see what you'd look like with curled hair?" asked Aunt Carol. This time the length and specific details of my torture seemed to get my friend's attention. "No, ma'am. I think Peter's hair looks nice, but it probably wouldn't look as good on me," my sympathetic pal answered. "Well, you never know until you try, Tommy," Mom said. At Aunt Carol's orders, I could not move or get up yet, just sit until she told me it was time for rinsing. After a good 30 minutes, Aunt Carol finally led me over to the kitchen sink, and while I stood on a step stool, face down, she turned on the water and filled a glass pitcher with it, somewhat warm. She began slowly pouring water over my curlers. I closed my eyes tightly, somewhat soothed by the comforting water, reducing the odor so I was able to breathe a bit easier again. The pain from the tightness of the curlers and the stench from the lotion seemed to ease. She ran the water and patted my curlers with the palms of her hands, being quite careful not to knock any of the curlers loose. I was under the water for several minutes. Finally, Aunt Carol pulled me from the sink and turned the water off. She had a towel ready for me and draped it over my head quickly. She pushed it against my temples and I felt better. Tommy watched with unabated interest. With my wet head still filled full with perm curlers, I retook my seat on the beauty stool. As I sat there in my mortification, waiting for the next step, the doorbell rang again. Aunt Carol excused herself and went to answer it. I could hear her speaking with another woman whose voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place. Imagine Tommy's surprise when his mother, Linda Harrison, walked into the kitchen. She smiled sweetly at me, saying, "Peter, you poor dear. We ladies all know what you're going through. And you're a brave youngster to do it." Turning to her son, she said, "Now Tommy, when Peter's mom and his Aunt Carol told me about him having a permanent wave and your fascination with your friend's permanent, I figured you should join him and have one too." I noticed Mrs. Harrison had a bag with a drugstore logo on it. She opened it and produced 2 little girl tonnette perm kits, a box of perm curlers, perm tissues, hairpins, clips and a couple of hairnets which she placed on the table. So that was what Aunt Carol had arranged while she talked on the phone with Mrs. Harrison. My pal had been set up, trapped, so that now he too was being subjected to the world of girls' permanent waving. Poor Tommy. Now, young man, you are going to change clothes. Then Rita and I will shampoo your hair. By that time, Peter will be in the processing cap and we can start your perm. You can imagine my friend's total surprise and his anguish. Tommy suddenly seemed very anxious, as though his life was about to end. But Mrs. Harrison was not to be disobeyed. She marched Tommy upstairs as he protested that he didn't need a perm and didn't want to go through what I was going through. Well, young man, you will find out, like Peter, what it's like to have a permanent and what some people undergo to look nice. Now come this way, his mom ordered. While Mom accompanied Tommy and Mrs. Harrison upstairs, Aunt Carol repeatedly pushed on the towel many times against the curlers, soaking up the water, so when she took it off, there were only a few drips of water which she wiped away. She opened the plastic wave processing cap, similar to a large-size girl's swim cap. This was see-through, clear plastic with little pink flowers printed all over it. She gently fitted over my head, over my ears, and buckled the strap under my chin. I always referred it as the curler helmet and wore it all the time with permanents that lasted all day or night with curler rods. It really was not that uncomfortable. The plastic had some type of cushioning that padded the curler rods and made it easier to keep on and even to sleep in. Tommy, accompanied by our mothers, walked back into the kitchen, dressed in old jeans and a long-sleeve Western shirt, well worn. He stared at me in the plastic cap like I was a space monster. I thought to myself, just wait, pal. Soon you too are going to look this weird. In minutes, he was seated on the beauty stool. Mrs. Harrison had also purchased a new plastic cape which she soon fastened around Tommy's neck. Ably assisted by my mom and my Aunt Carol, Mrs. Harrison began expertly putting Tommy's hair into the plastic curler rods and the end papers. The look on his face as he felt the tight pull of the first several perm curlers was priceless. I could tell that he felt uncomfortable. Tommy vainly tried to hold his head properly so he could be set in the perm curlers, alternately staring at his knees under the plastic cape or looking wryly at me. I knew that he was thinking this was a horrifying and terribly embarrassing procedure for a boy to go through, being subjected to hair curling in a truly girlish fashion. Like me, he had a feeling of doom. Despite enduring this process in as much privacy as was possible in our kitchen, his terrified eyes said he was the victim of these women and feeling girlish and ashamed, with my aunt and mom helping his mother subject him to this female event. Like me, he was too polite and well-mannered to defy his mother. I knew he was realizing that he was being transformed into what he had seen in me all morning, a boy looking like a girl, having a permanent wave, his head covered in perm curlers. Mrs. Harrison was faster at winding of the finger-sized spin curlers than even Aunt Carol. And she had the advantage of two other women helping her. I was amazed at how quickly Tommy's head was disappearing under the barrage of curlers. Mrs. Harrison kept telling him to hold his head perfectly still as she wound the rods into the various sections of his hair. Smoothly, tightly, meticulously, oh so carefully, Tommy's hair was wound tight. I watched him wiggle and try to hold still. I knew that this was the easy part of the permanent and it would quickly worsen with the waving lotion application which would come after she finished winding. Tommy stared at me in continued disbelief. As they worked on Tommy's hair, the three women gossiped about hair. In the midst of this, Mrs. Harrison made a casual comment which made me and her son pay closer attention to the ladies' talk. "This is great fun, Rita. My thanks to you and Carol for letting us join you. I have an idea. The next time the boys have permanents, let's take them to a beauty shop. I know the perfect place over in Shady Hill," Mrs. Harrison said. Tommy and I stared at each other in total disbelief. The next time? In a beauty shop? Where women had permanents? We couldn't have heard her right, could we? Our moms wouldn't really do that to us, would they? My mom was saying, well, I do Peter's permanents here because beauty shops are so expensive. And of course, the need for privacy. Oh, of course. I understand. And Tommy will too. He wouldn't dare tell anyone about his permanent, will you, dear? Tommy shook his curler-covered head no. While continuing to put perm curlers on my friend's head, Mrs. Harrison went on. This friend of mine owns a beauty parlor over in the Shady Hill section of town. She's a marvelous beautician. You wouldn't believe how many men she does privately in her shop. More than you could ever guess. But I think it would be good for our boys to have at least one professional permanent and all that goes with it, you know, a good deep conditioning treatment, a good haircut, a nice professional set. And she could do their fingernails while they're sitting under the dryers. And maybe even give them a mud pack to keep their skin nice. Oh, that sounds wonderful, my mom said. But I can imagine what a beauty shop over in that neighborhood would cost. More than I could afford for his hair, no matter how darling the results. Well, Mrs. Harrison answered, Sheila, the owner, is a dear high school friend of mine. She'd be glad to do it. And I will gladly pay for the works for both of our boys. I'm just so happy for this inspiration and your help today. This is something I've thought about doing from time to time. I so appreciate you including me and Tommy. I'd be glad to treat the boys the next time. Please, would you allow me to do that? What do you say, Rita? I think it would just be so great for them to have the experience of a real day of beauty. Please, say yes, won't you? Mom looked at Aunt Carol. They smiled at each other and at Mrs. Harrison. Oh, Linda, that's so very kind of you. Thank you so much. They should ready for permanence about the same time, probably right as school lets out for the summer. You're very generous. Sure, if your friend is willing, let's do it. You're right, it will be a good experience for the boys, my mom gushed to Mrs. Harrison. I'll call my friend Sheila as soon as I can. I'll just bet she'll love the idea of having our youngsters in her shop, Mrs. Harrison answered. I knew that Tommy and I were doomed, not just today but the next time. We would be in a real ladies' beauty shop. A day of beauty? Really? A whole day? Conditioning, whatever that was. Permanent waves. Our hair set by a beautician, just like when our moms went to a beauty parlor. Hairnets, probably pink, on our heads. In front of women we didn't know. Those funny pads over our ears. Sitting under those big silver-domed hair dryers. Our fingernails done. With nail polish. A mud pack facial. Ladies and girls all around staring at us. Oh, help. Mom, say it ain't so, please. Soon enough, Tommy's head was completely secured in perm curlers. His mother instructed him to use the bathroom. I knew that he would stare at his hair in the bathroom mirror, fascinated by his strange appearance. I also knew, as he did not, what torment was just ahead for him. When he returned to his place on the beauty stool, Mrs. Harrison attached a towel around the collar of the plastic cape. She handed him a towel to catch the dripping solution. With my mom holding a tray to Tommy's forehead and Aunt Carol holding one to his neckline, Mrs. Harrison began to expertly apply the perm solution to Tommy's rigidly placed perm curlers. In minutes, his eyes were tearing up as mine had. I knew that he would never tell friends of what he witnessed today. He had held to his word to keep my terrible secret. Now he too was being initiated into the secret realm of boys who had been given permanence. He too was feeling how the dreadful waving lotion impacted every part of the body, overpowering the mind. I knew he felt like he couldn't breathe. It was devastating. He tried in vain not to let me see him cry, but he couldn't keep it from me or the 3 adult women putting him through this terrible beauty ritual. Later, he confided to me that he understood why I had cried, noting there was probably no way not to cry. Finally, and not too soon for my real pal, the first part was over. His poor curler-covered head was absolutely soaking wet with the odorous solution. The next step meant waiting about 30 minutes for the application of the warm water. Tommy continued watching, open-eyed at the goings-on with my hair and with his. There wasn't much either Tommy or I could do, other than to just sit and endure what our mothers were doing, and doing with obvious enjoyment. It would soon be noon. While the ladies waited for poor Tommy's hair to curl, they talked about lunch plans. They decided that Aunt Carol would apply the rinse water to Tommy's perm curlers, dry him and put his wave processing cap on his head, making us a pair of curler-helmeted creatures. Mrs. Harrison and my mother would fix a nice lunch for us all. Despite having been told several times already what was involved in having a permanent wave, my skinny pal was not completely aware of what would happen this afternoon. His mother had clearly decided that she did not want him to wear the curler rods the rest of the day in the self-neutralization, or air oxidation, for a number of hours, but rather, like me, she would get him out of the curler rods, which would mean sitting even longer, getting his hair set with rollers. I was very bored with sitting and realized what neutralizing meant, as Aunt Carol and Mom had been rotating the long and short, neutralized, permanents on me the last several years. I had most of my permanents in the self-neutralization method, wearing the curler rods all day or night, which still meant, after the rods were removed, hours later, or even the next day, my hair would still be set. My mom had seldom let me use her bonnet hairdryer. Even though she used the bonnet quite often, she spent a lot of time with her hair up in rollers. All the women in the neighborhood seemed to practice the same ritual as most had hairdryers, but regularly went about in curlers, pins, clips or rollers. As I mentioned, I spent time in rollers, in the privacy of my own house, in the backyard, reading, playing games, working on my puppets or watching TV. I hated it, but my aunts, mom and grandmothers always protected my privacy. Also, Mom used a black hairnet on me when she at times insisted that I wear the hairnet. It was not always that she made me wear a hairnet. And when I had to wear the sleep bonnet, she used a plain dark blue one on me. And at the times when she covered my set hair with a scarf, she used a very plain white or gray one. I realized, as my pal did not, that our moms were going to put our hair up and in all likelihood, he was going to have to go home in the evening with his hair in rollers and wearing a hairnet. I didn't envy him the prospect of having to go outside the very first time he had his hair up in rollers. After quietly enduring his 30 minutes of torment, Tommy finally moved over to the kitchen sink, as directed. Aunt Carol had him stand on the step stool, his face down. As when she had rinsed me, she turned on the water and filled the glass pitcher. She began slowly pouring water over his perm curlers. She ran the water and patted his curlers with the palms of her hands, being quite careful not to knock any of the curlers loose. She kept Tommy under the stream of water for 4 or 5 minutes. Finally, Aunt Carol turned the water off. She had a towel ready for Tommy and draped it quickly over his head and pushed it against his temples. Aunt Carol pushed the towel many times against his perm curlers, soaking up the water, then she wiped away the few remaining drops. She opened the plastic wave processing cap from the kit Mrs. Harrison had brought. The one to go on poor Tommy's head was yellow-colored plastic with little animals printed all over it, clearly one designed for a little girl's permanent. I felt sorry that my pal was going to have to wear this for the next several hours. My aunt carefully fixed it over Tommy's curler-outfitted head, covering his ears and buckling the strap under his chin. The plastic cap began at once to fog up. I knew it would clear as his hair began to dry, yet would hold the moisture and never dry totally, even as the one on my head already had. He grinned shyly at me. Our moms called us to the dining room table. The first consolation for this otherwise terrible day was the lunch feast our moms served. While Tommy had been processing and rinsed, Mrs. Harrison had gone to a neighborhood delicatessen and returned with fried chicken and potato salad. My mom had made 2 big pitchers of lemonade. She had also sliced up a big bunch of apples and oranges. For dessert, my mom, who did a lot of very good baking, put out 2 dozen chocolate chip cookies, freshly made 2 nights ago. Tommy and I sat opposite each other at the table, looking like a pair of space creatures. Every time Mrs. Harrison made some comment about how cute we looked, Tommy turned absolutely scarlet. Eventually, we were excused while the 3 women remained at the table, talking, drinking coffee and eating Mom's cookies. Telling us we could go to my bedroom, but to play carefully so that no perm curler would come loose, Mom allowed us to leave the table. My pal and I went to my room to work on our puppets. When we got to my room, we stood in front of the mirror and looked at ourselves in our curlers and plastic caps. Tommy stared at the perm curlers under the caps on our heads and asked, "Why are our moms doing this to us?" "I really don't know, pal. My mom has insisted that my hair needs this. I didn't know your mom would feel that way, too. Moms are strange sometimes. But we better not disturb these curlers or we'll be in trouble." He asked me, "So we just can't take the curlers out?" "Oh no," I told him, "it will be several hours before they take these off of our heads." He made a throaty noise, almost a deep gasp. "Hours?" "Yeah, hours. We can play and stuff until then. But we'll be like this for hours. Probably till dinner time." Tommy asked the question that I knew had an answer which he wouldn't like. "What happens then? Are we done, I hope?" "No. We aren't done then." Despite what my mom and my aunt had explained about the whole permanent wave procedure, he had not grasped the fact that we would have to submit to being set in rollers. "Gosh, we're not? What else can they do to us?" I paused a moment then said, "They will set our hair, with rollers and pins. Then we either have to sit under a hairdryer, one with a big plastic bonnet, or, what my mom usually makes me do, sleep in rollers until tomorrow morning." My pal stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Seriously? You mean we'll look like girls? Like your sisters or my cousin Beth? Like my mom in the beauty shop? Like girls, like with our hair in hair curlers? Like wearing those antenna things to hear messages from outer space? You mean we're going to look like the girls from school after they've been at the pool?" In the summertime, all the neighborhood girls put their hair up on curlers after they had been swimming. You could always tell who was coming from the pool by looking for girls with wet hair up on rollers or in pin curls. "Yeah, just like girls," I moaned. "And if this is like the usual in this house, after they set us in rollers and pins, they'll probably put hairnets on us, too." With a pained look of disbelief on his face, Tommy asked, "Will my hair look like a girl afterwards? How does it feel to have your hair in rollers? Is that worse than these perm curlers? What does it feel like to look like a girl? What does it feel like to have a hairnet on your head?" He seemed more terrified about having his hair set than when his mom had announced that he would have a permanent. We talked quietly about this hideous prospect for a while. Tommy had lots more questions about the hair setting experience. I helped him realize that he would have to go home with his hair set in rollers. To spare him that terrible agony, we decided to ask our moms if he could stay overnight at my house. Here he would have an experienced fellow sufferer and remain in a safe environment, free from detection by others from school or church. Now, you understand why, when I told you about Mom giving me permanence, I hoped you wouldn't tell anybody about this and made you promise, cross your heart, and hope to die, never to say a word. Now you know. It's a very girlish procedure, I reminded him. But you'll survive, pal. I'm kinda glad that now I'm not the only boy to go through this. You really are my best pal. For the next few hours, we were just two boy pals, playing games, thinking up a new skit for several puppets, talking about school, and discussing the spring Sunday school play in which we both had parts. Every so often, Tommy looked at my perm curlers or would reach up to gently touch the ones on his own head through the plastic cap. Sometimes, we both felt like strange characters, like medieval knights or World War I soldiers with our plastic helmets on, tied under our chins. But the permanent wave curlers affixed to our heads and very visible under the tight plastic, the flowers on my plastic cap and the little animals on his, reminded us that we were trapped like girls, undergoing a rite of passage that most girls went through a couple times a year, or like our mothers, suffering the torment that women endured for the sake of beauty. Before we knew it, Aunt Carol came into my room. First, she complimented us on playing well and not messing up any of the curler rods on our heads. Next, she unbuckled the straps from under our chins and gently peeled off the plastic caps, exposing our curler-covered heads. The hours had passed fairly quickly. It was getting close to supper time. She led us back to the kitchen where we saw two chairs arranged facing each other. Aunt Carol directed me to one chair and Tommy to the other. As we sat staring at each other, Aunt Carol gently unwound the curlers at the back of my head, worked down the sides and then the top. Mrs. Harrison did the same to Tommy's perm curlers. He gasped at the sight of our tighter clear hair that came out of the perm curlers and wanted to know if our hair would now be this curly. My mother assured him that once our hair was set on rollers and dry, it would look fairly the same as mine always did, that is, like boys with naturally curly hair. When Mom mentioned that Aunt Carol and Mrs. Harrison would be rolling our hair, Tommy looked at the kitchen table and spotted the rollers and pins on the table as Aunt Carol was getting them ready for us to be set. Tommy grimaced over the idea. I saw a look of panic in his eyes. With all the perm curlers out, he reached up to touch his hair and feel the curls. He had a sense of disbelief. He had survived having his hair put in the perm curler rods, the application of the solution, the warm water rinse and several hours in the plastic cap. But now he looked panic-struck as his mom was about to set his freshly curled hair. Aunt Carol used a comb and a squirt bottle of water to moisten my hair before she dipped her comb into a dark-colored jar of setting lotion and dragged the liquid gel through my hair with the rat-tail comb several times before she began to section it off with clips. At this point, my pal sat with his mouth wide open. Before he could say a word, his mother was doing the same to him. In a matter of moments, the ladies had bent our heads down and began to wind our hair on an assortment of gray, white, green and brown smooth plastic rollers. Softly, Tommy gasped again, muttering he had never seen a boy in hair rollers before or one getting his hair set before. As his mother placed the rollers and pins on his head, she commented that we would emerge as handsome young men with the kind of hairstyles that male stars in Hollywood and on Broadway wore. She also told us that while we had played that afternoon, she had called her beautician friend at the Pearls and Lace Beauty Shop and arranged a beauty parlor visit for us in June, after school was out. While our moms and Aunt Carol oohed and awed over the prospect of us having our permanent waves professionally done the next time, Tommy and I could just roll our eyes at each other and stare resignedly as our heads continued to be transformed into well-set hair. As we were set from the center of our heads, down the back, and then to the sides, I could tell that my pal, undergoing his first ever hair setting, was biting back his tears. As Aunt Carol finished with the rollers and pins on my head, she explained to Tommy that he and I would both be sleeping in rollers tonight. This gave me the opportunity to suggest that since this was new for my best pal, that he stay overnight with me. Fortunately, our moms agreed. However, in the next moment, my friend had to endure the indignity of having his rollers covered with a hairnet, fortunately, black rather than sissy pink or something goofy like green, then having his whole head covered with a scarf, also a plain black, so we ate dinner in our roller set hair. True to form, my mom had suggested to Linda Harrison that they experiment with styles, so Aunt Carol had set both of them in rollers as well. My sisters, both in high school, Didn't say a word about another boy at the table in curlers. In fact, my oldest sister, Cindy, had come home, showered and set her own hair so that of the 7 people at the dinner table, 5 of us had our hair set. After dinner, Mrs. Harrison drove home in her rollers. Tommy and I watched television. When it was time, we prepared for bed. Mom spread sleeping bags on the bedroom floor and let us use them. It had been an exhausting day, especially for poor Tommy. Aunt Carol was a magician when it came to preparing my set hair for bed. Many women and girls complained about sleeping in rollers, but they didn't have my aunt or her knack of getting me tightly into the hairnet, the rollers doubly secure, tissue surrounding the edges and the slumber cap, so that I was very seldom uncomfortable sleeping in them. Sleeping in curlers was a problem for Tommy. Despite my aunt's careful arrangement of his hairnet and sleep cap, he took a long time to get used to the feel on his head and to find a comfortable position in which to sleep. In addition, he fretted about how to explain to other kids why his hair looked different, the whole process of getting the permanent wave, how girlish we both looked in perm curlers and now in rollers and hairnets, and so on. I calmed him down as best I could. My fretting, which I kept to myself, was what was going to happen to us in June when our mothers took us to the Pearls and Lace Beauty Shop. The next 2 months went by smoothly. We did our puppet plays, performed in the Sunday school drama at church, played baseball and waited for the school year to come to an end. Every week it seemed either Tommy slept over at my house or I did at his, and we slept in rollers and hairnets. At my house, Aunt Carol put our hair up before bed. Aunt Carol also introduced my pal to being set with bobby pins and hair clips as well as rollers. At Tommy's house, his mom would set her own hair and then do ours. At first, I felt shy about a woman not a member of my family setting my hair, but I quickly got used to it. Mrs. Harrison invested in 2 home hair dryers with big plastic bonnets which she used on us on her house. My pal and I would sit at the kitchen table looking at each other as our set hair dried under the warm, flowery bonnets while I wondered what it would be like when we were sitting in a beauty shop under those monstrous dryers with our hair professionally set. When June finally came, my usual excitement about the end of school faded as the prospect of our beauty parlor permanence drew ever closer. Our mothers talked together repeatedly about this hideous event, constantly referring to it as the boys' day of beauty. Their joy and anticipation made me all the more fretful. What would it be like to be in a beauty shop with women we didn't know giving us the permanence? What other women or girls might be in the shop and watching our humiliation? Would our moms really submit us to manicures and mud packs? My stomach churned at the fearful prospects. So it finally happened that on a Monday morning in June, on what should have been the start of the first full week of summer vacation, Tommy and I sat in Mrs. Harrison's big Oldsmobile sedan as she drove us to the Shady Hill part of town. This was an area that later would be called upscale with large private homes, fancy apartment buildings and a business district with expensive shops and restaurants. Mom had awakened me at 6:30, just like on a school day. She emphasized that we had an early appointment at the beauty shop because Tommy and I were scheduled for what she excitedly called the works. Mrs. Harrison, with Tommy in the car, picked me up at 7:45. She too was bubbling with excitement while Tommy and I felt like bandits headed for our hanging. She found a place to park and led us to the entrance of the Pearls and Lace Beauty Shop. Pearls and Lace was every bit as feminine as it sounded. The entrance door consisted of frosted white glass with Pearls and Lace Beauty Shop in large fancy script in the center of the top panel of the glass. The windows on either side were covered with lace curtains to protect the modesty of the women having their hair done in one of the smartest beauty shops in town. Mrs. Harrison pushed the door open and ushered us into a well-lit reception area where there was a small reception desk and an expensive sofa with a few well-cushioned chairs where clients awaited their appointments. The floor was covered with a lush black carpet. An umbrella stand and several racks of ladies' magazines sat near the sofa and chairs. As she opened the glass door, an old-fashioned bell, situated over the door, loudly announced our arrival. Mrs. Harrison had told my mom that the owner agreed to take us on Monday because on Monday she was usually closed, so there would be no other patrons for us to worry about. Good morning, Linda. If you and the boys would like to take a seat, I'll be with you momentarily. Sheila's singing voice came welcoming and reassuring from behind a curtain. True to her word, in a minute, the curtain opened and a slim, very pretty woman of Mrs. Harrison's age appeared. She was well dressed, wearing a very 1950s classy hairstyle. Her makeup was the most elaborate I had ever seen in person. She looked like women in the movies or on television. She had gold earrings in her ears. Over her very smart skirt and blouse she wore a beautician's white smock with Sheila stitched in red over her left breast. Her slim legs shone in beige hosiery. She wore black high heels. Linda, it's so good to see you, dear, she gushed as she and Mrs. Harrison did that womanly cheek-to-cheek without smudging each other's makeup. And this must be Tommy and Peter. What good-looking youngsters. Ready for your day of grooming, sweethearts? Gretchen, our appointments are here, she said over her shoulder. At her call, a 20-ish red-haired young woman appeared. She too wore an elaborate 50s hairdo, a beautician's smock over a nice dress, stockings and high heels. This is my most talented young stylist, Gretchen, who's going to help do our young customers today. Gretchen, this is Linda Harrison, my best friend from high school, her son, Tommy, and his friend, Peter Stowe, Sheila said by way of introduction. Honey, why don't you get our customers into their smocks while Linda and I talk a few minutes? At her boss' direction, Gretchen led us through a curtained doorway to the left of the reception area. She helped first Tommy then me into pink smocks which covered us from our necks to our ankles, tying them closed at the back while explaining that this was to protect our clothes while we had what she unabashedly referred to as your beauty treatments. Having gotten us clad in our pink smocks, she led us back into the reception area. Don't they look darling? Sheila asked Mrs. Harrison as we re-entered. Now you run along and enjoy your shopping, Linda. We should have them well into in their perms by the time you come back, but don't hurry. Take your time, dear. You know they'll be fine. Mrs. Harrison kissed us both on the cheek, telling us to enjoy, and she breezed out of the door. Sheila locked the beauty shop door and made sure that the closed sign hung in the middle. Enjoy? How could we enjoy beauty treatments? All right, sweethearts, let's get started. We've a lot to do with you two darlings. Follow me, please, and she guided us through the curtain in front of the reception area and into the main salon. The black and white tile floor gleamed. The expansive room was brightly lit by a row of a large chandelier-style lighting arranged across the ceiling. The space on both the right and the left was subdivided, using netted curtain material, into 3 cubicle-style self-contained styling areas on each side. Each cubicle contained a workstation with a styling chair, shampoo sink, supply cabinet of expensive wood, and a large mirror. In the very middle of the salon area was a bank of 6 silver-domed hairdryers, back-to-back with 3 facing each way. To the rear of the main shop area were 2 larger cubicles. Each contained a bigger chair which could be tilted so the ladies could receive facials and other treatments, as we were later to discover. Sheila took Tommy into the first cubicle on the left. Gretchen put me in the one next to it. Sheila drew back the netted curtain between the 2 cubicles, explaining that when she had customers who wanted to talk and to see each other, she could do this easily just by pulling back the curtain. I thought you two might want to chat and you might feel more relaxed if you can see each other. You'll be having the exact same beauty treatments. Relax and enjoy. Let's get started, shall we? The styling chairs were impressive salon furniture, sturdily constructed with lots of metal levers, upholstered in elegant, smooth pink leather. Having never in my young life been in a beauty shop or a barber shop before, I was impressed. Gretchen gestured me to sit. The seat was a bit high with a footrest, for support, about 6 inches above the floor. I eased myself up and slid as far back as I could into the soft upholstery. I put my feet on the footrest and Gretchen turned the chair so that I was facing the mirror. The sensation of being off the ground and moving was strange. Gretchen placed a clear plastic cape over my smock and secured it in the back. Next, a towel was placed around my shoulders and tucked in around the collar of my smock. Gretchen then placed another towel around the opposite way around my front. I wondered what all this was for: smock, cape, 2 towels. I didn't see any permanent wave equipment in sight. Sheila explained that our first treatment would be a deep conditioning treatment. She and Gretchen each opened a jar which had a thick, yellow, very sweet-smelling cream in it. Using little spatulas, they spread a thick layer of it on our hair. They used their fingers to smooth the paste evenly over our heads until Tommy and I both looked like we had yellow cream instead of hair. A plastic shower cap was placed on each of our heads. Then a hairnet, pink of course, my worst fears, was placed over the shower cap, fastened in the back, and then the ends tied into little bows right in the middle of our foreheads. The final indignity was a large vinyl cap which covered ears and forehead and snapped shut under our chins. They fit more snugly than the plastic caps we had endured at my house. These caps were plugged into wall outlets and the heat controls turned on. The controls were in the back and so beyond our reach. For 20 minutes we just cooked, alternately looking at our images in the mirrors, then staring fearful-eyed at each other. The heat generated a pleasant mint-like smell from the cream on our hair. But the caps were uncomfortably tight and very warm. So this torture was what deep conditioning was about. Ugh. And already we were in pink hairnets. Looking in the mirror, I could see those big bullet hair dryers lying in wait in back of us, and I knew that soon enough we'd be suffering under them, as I had heard my mom and grandmothers complain about being endlessly basted under hot dryers by beauticians. This was going to be an awful day. At that moment I had no idea just then how awful it really would be, before it was over. After we had simmered for 20 minutes, Sheila and Gretchen reappeared. Gretchen turned off the heat in my cap. She removed the cap, the hairnet, the plastic cap, and the 2 towels around my neck. Next she turned to the sink and turned on the water. She ran it for a few moments, adjusting volume and hot and cold until the temperature was exactly what she wanted. Leaving the water running, she dried her hands and returned to the side of the chair. "Now, sweetheart, just relax while I get you into position to be shampooed," Gretchen remarked. She swiveled the chair around until the sink was behind me. I hear a metallic click. She put one hand on my shoulder and applied firm pressure as I felt my body and the back of the chair leaning gently backwards. Gretchen gently pushed downward on my shoulder, while my feet rose slightly upward, until I sensed the cold porcelain of the sink on the back of my neck. With another metallic click, the chair stopped. Looking up, I saw Gretchen leaning over me, her hands pushing my hair into the sink. After a few moments, I felt the sensation of warm water on my scalp. Gretchen's talented fingers guided the warm water through my hair. Soon I feel the cold shampoo reaching my scalp and then the wonderful massaging sensation of being shampooed. After a thorough shampoo and rinse, she raised me back to a sitting position and turned the chair so that I was again facing the mirror. As I sat there, facing the mirror, Gretchen towel-dried my hair. She reached into the cabinet and removed a tray containing the perm curler rods and other equipment for my perm, which she placed on a little table which she had set up beside the styling chair. She pulled on a pair of rubber gloves. Gretchen slipped a comb through my wet hair, going gently to work out any tangles that the shampooing might have left. Then she separated my hair into 8 small sections and pinned each section out of the way with a long silver clip. Sheila and Gretchen conferred about the type of perm and the setting pattern they intended to use on us. Gretchen tipped some perming solution into a glass dish, then with a sponge dampened the first section of my hair with it. The strong smell of the solution hit my nose and made me wince, but it was not as awful as the stuff Aunt Carol used in the home permanent kits. Using her comb, she separated my hair into little strands right at the front of my scalp, and maintaining a gentle pressure, held it extended with one hand. With her other hand, she took a piece of fresh, shiny end paper, folded it so that it covered the strand she had just combed, on both sides, front and back. She slid it about halfway out from my scalp, took a pink rod, and began winding down toward the scalp at a 45-degree angle. The pull on my hair was much firmer than Aunt Carol's winding. My head was going to feel very constricted by the time she had me completely set in the perm curlers. The quick-fingered beautician worked rapidly in the routine of wetting with solution, papering and affixing the pink curlers as she moved her way backwards to the crown of my head. I shot a glance to my left. I saw Tommy's head being similarly transformed under Sheila's deft ministrations. As I sat watching, I felt my palms sweating on the armrests of the styling chair. I felt more nervous that day than any time I had a permanent wave at home. I fervently wished my mother had never agreed to this torture. Having finished the first row, running like railroad ties along my scalp, Gretchen proceeded to do a second parallel row on the top of my head. Completing that, she told me to tip my head forward as she started to wind the back of my hair up onto the perm curlers. As I sat with my chin rested on the plastic of the cape in which I was draped, she started a section above my right ear, running perpendicular to the rows on top of my head. First one, then another pink perm curler was firmly wound up into my hair. I tried to count them but lost track. My scalp was tingling all over from the steady and increasing pressure, and I could feel the additional weight of damp and rigidly wound curlers on my head. Gretchen continued to roll row after row until the right side was done, then she moved to the left side, and repeated the process. Finally, after almost 3/4 of an hour, she was done. I turned to see Tommy in the same situation with an armada of pink perm curlers fixed to his head. "How many of those rods did you use on me, ma'am?" Tommy politely asked Sheila. She laughed and said, "I think each of you has about 75 or so rods in your hair. Are you two still comfortable? Now comes the bad part. We're going to apply a lot more of the perming solution to each and every rod on your heads until they are really soaked. Then you will have to process. Why don't you two sweethearts use the restroom now?" The beauticians removed the towels and capes from our necks. Sheila led us over to the restroom, which was marked ladies but, she explained, was the only one in the beauty shop. Glad of the short reprieve, Tommy and I scooted in. After using the toilets in adjoining stalls, we washed our hands and felt the wet, very stationary perm curlers on each other's head. "Wow, this is worse than the permanence we were given at your mom's house," Tommy sighed. "Yeah, I know," I commiserated. "Now comes lots of smelly solution. Then we still are going to get all that other stuff, our nails painted, our hair set on rollers, being under those dryers and all that stuff. I wonder if we get to eat any lunch?" "Well, you ready, pal?" Tommy grinned weakly at me and we headed back to the styling chairs. "Tommy, your mom called. She has not yet finishing her shopping. We're going to apply the solution and get you two processing, okay dears?" Sheila told us. "By the time we're done with that, Mrs. Harrison will be here with your lunches." Once I was reseated, Gretchen refastened the cape around my neck and put a fresh towel both at the front and another at the back. I watched carefully as Gretchen took a strip of cotton and fitted it under the line of perm curlers all around my head. This was something new, compared to the curved tray Mom and Aunt Carol used at home. Gretchen had already poured the solution into a rather large squeeze bottle which had a little sponge on the tip. "Sorry about the bad odor," she said, "but that's the price you have to pay to have a pretty permanent for the look your mother's asked for." She tipped my head forward and I felt the coldness of the solution as she pressed it onto the perm rods. Beginning at the nape of my neck, I sensed her squeezing the cool, slippery liquid onto the permanent rods. The smell started to overpower me, but there was no escape. I could feel the cold solution running down my head. I was very thankful for the cotton wool around the perm rod line. As the solution was applied to the rods on top of my head, she gently tipped me backwards. One curler after another became saturated, and my head became heavier and heavier. As with home permanents, Tommy and I both shed a few tears, but the beauticians carefully wiped our eyes with tissues. Finally, Gretchen was finished. I had a head full of very wet, very smelly, very tight perm rods. She removed the cotton roping and replaced it with a fresh strip. Gretchen put a plastic cap, something like a woman's swim cap, tightly over my head. This cap was also much tighter than the plastic cap Aunt Carol used on my head. I could feel the cap pushing the curler rods tightly against my scalp. I turned again to my left and saw Tommy, already in the same situation, the bulge of the permanent curlers showing under the tight cap on his head. "You two look so cute sitting there. Now for the hair dryers, sweethearts. At this point your hair has to process. That takes heat. So we're going to put you each under a dryer for 20 to 30 minutes. Ladies find it hard to hear under the dryer, so you probably won't be able to talk to each other while you process. On the arm of the dryer chair is a little bell which you can ring if the heat gets too uncomfortable. Just remember, permanents do need to be very warm to form the best curl." "Okay, dears, follow me," Sheila directed. This was even worse than I thought. We were being put under those monster dryers already. As we left the styling chairs, I noticed that Gretchen had already turned on 2 dryers which were making a whooshing sound. At Sheila's signal, Tommy sat in one chair and I took the other at his right. After I sat down, Gretchen lowered the hood over my head, turned the heat control higher, smiled at me and walked away. I could see a manicurist table, which I recognized from pictures in Mom's Ladies magazines, in front of the back cubicles. I wondered if this was when we were to have our fingernails done, but neither beautician made a move to start manicures. Tommy and I just sat in silence, prisoners in the strange new world of big hot hair dryers. Sheila was right. It was impossible to hear anything, what with the tight caps over our heads and ears and the sound of the dryers humming away. As we cooked under the hot dryers, the perm solution smell worsened and the perm curlers seemed to tighten even more, if that were possible. It seemed to me that beauty parlor permanents were worse torture than home permanents. I wondered where we would be sitting when they put the mud packs on our faces. I guessed that we'd be in those back rooms, but I didn't know for sure. Might we be back in the styling chairs and have to look at our reflections in the big mirrors or at each other, with our faces covered in dark cream? These places ought to be called beauty prisons, not beauty parlors, I thought. Exactly 20 minutes after we had been put under the dryers, Sheila appeared in front of her 2 captives. She turned off the dryers, lifted the hoods, removed the caps, and partially unwound a rod on each of us. "Time to check the curling process on both of you. Your mother came in, Tommy, and she went to buy some lunch for us all. She'll return with food in a bit. Now, I think we need another 10 minutes for the curl we want for you, Tommy, but Peter, you are ready. Of course, you've had permanents before, so your hair is more responsive to this good professional permanent," she said. Sheila refastened our perm curlers, then replaced the cap, lowered the dryer hood and turned the dryer back on over poor Tommy. "Your permanent looks good, Peter. You can go back to your chair over there and I'll have Gretchen come to rinse you." First, Gretchen used a number of hand towels to blot the rods, explaining that the more perm solution she could remove before the rinse, the better the final style. After she lowered my head into the basin and I again felt the cool porcelain around my neck, she began to spray my head with warm water. As the soothing warm water flowed over the perm rods, I kept my eyes tightly closed. She rinsed me for about 5 or 6 minutes to remove all the perm solution. While the water cascaded over my head, the perm smell began to diminish. After the rinse, Gretchen had me sit up. She wrapped a towel around my head and gently pushed against the rods. Discarding the first wet towel, she took more hand towels and, one by one, and dried each separate rod individually. The perm curlers pulled against my hair, which was not a pleasant sensation. When finished, she explained, "We are going to air neutralize your perm. We allow your hair to dry on the rods. The air neutralizes the perm and locks the curl into place. After 30 minutes, we put you back under the hairdryer, set on low heat, and let you finish there. I'll put a hair net on you now, which will keep the perm rods in place and protect the curls as they set. It's lunch time. You and Tommy can eat some lunch while your perms neutralize. Then we'll pop you both back under the dryers." "Okay, honey?" What could I say? I realized that my worst fears were taking place. In a moment I would be wearing a pink, girlish hairnet over my perm curlers while sitting in a ladies' beauty shop. I had been under a big hairdryer and was going to be placed back under it right after I ate. I just smiled weakly as she produced a pink hairnet and covered my perm curlers with it. I stood up and followed Gretchen into the reception area. Mrs. Harrison sat there with lunches for us. "Oh, Peter, you look darling," she gushed. She kissed my cheeks. "Relax, dear. I know you feel a little uncomfortable, but I understand, and so do Sheila and Gretchen. It's safe here, honey." In a few minutes, Tommy received the safe assurances after being told he looked sweet. For 20 minutes, Tommy and I sat with Mrs. Harrison on the big, comfortable chairs in the waiting area. Wearing our plastic capes, our hair tightly secured in perm curlers with hair nets over them and the nets tied closed with little bows right in the middle of our foreheads, we ate sandwiches, apples and pieces of cake and drank milk. At the very minute we had wiped our mouths with napkins, Sheila reappeared. "All right, sweethearts, time for me to put you back under the dryers. Come with me." "Oh, Sheila, they're just so darling." "You're wonderful," Mrs. Harrison gushed. "We still have a lot to do, Linda. Did you finish all your necessary shopping for your big event?" "Yes, all done," Mrs. Harrison answered. "When are you going to run your other errand?" "Right now. We don't want to miss the last part of the children's transformation, do we?" With that, Mrs. Harrison giggled and, saying goodbye to us, went out the door. Tommy looked at me with a question in his eyes. I just shrugged my shoulders in response. Neither of us could figure why his mom was so excited and silly. The full beauty shop torture went another step when the beauticians placed smooth cotton pads over our ears and under the hair nets for protection, as they explained to us. Looking like our mothers, we went back to the dryer chairs. The pre-warmed hoods were lowered over our heads. We were left to bake under the low heat for about 40 minutes. As before, I could hear nothing under the dryer except the hum of the machine itself. The beauticians walked over to us at the end of the 40 minutes. Gretchen turned off the dryer and raised the hood. She directed me back to her elaborate leather styling chair. After I was seated, she turned the chair around and lowered my head into the cold porcelain of the opening in the sink. She removed all of the pink perm curlers, much to my great relief. She dropped them, along with the used curl papers, in the sink and proceeded to rinse my hair. As when she had done my shampoo earlier, I felt her deft fingers carefully directing the warm water all through my hair. Once my hair had been rinsed to her satisfaction, Gretchen raised the chair to a sitting position and turned me around so that I was facing the mirror. I noticed in the mirror that my hair was extremely curly, much more so than with any permanent my mom and aunt had given me. And my hair appeared to have shrunk considerably in length. I looked almost like Shirley Temple, with a mass of curls falling in every direction. Seeming to read my thoughts, Gretchen said, "Now don't worry, honey, about how curly your hair is. We are not done with you yet. Now I'm going to trim your hair just a bit. Then I need to set you and put you back under the dryer. Your set will give a nice, pretty style." Gretchen used a comb and scissors to carefully and neatly trim my freshly curled hair to her satisfaction. Looking at the small amount of hair on the plastic cape when she had finished, I thought to myself that I had just received the most minimal haircut of my life. Gretchen removed the plastic cape, shaking the cut hair to the tile floor. She wrapped a shorter plastic cape around my neck, over which she placed another clean towel. Smiling sweetly, she asked, "Are you ready for me to put you in rollers now?" I answered, "Yes." "Sure." What could I say? My curls, free just briefly from the perm rods, were about to be imprisoned on rollers. Then back for another session of baking under that domed metal monster. Gretchen took a position directly behind my chair. She carefully combed through my wet curly hair, moving it all backwards. Picking up a bowl filled with setting lotion, she took a long-tailed comb and applied the setting lotion to my wet hair. She applied the creamy substance with great care until all of my hair was covered with the sheen of it. Gretchen removed a tray of rollers from the cabinet and carefully placed it within reach on the same little table where the perm curlers had been earlier. She lowered and tilted the chair just a bit backwards so that my head was positioned right beneath her breasts. With my head positioned to her satisfaction and the rollers, clips and pins within reach, Gretchen began my first professional beauty shop set. I watched carefully as she raised the first strand of my hair with her rat-tail comb. I saw her place a medium-sized roller which she wound tightly towards my scalp and secured with a two-pronged metal clip. I glanced as best I could to my left and saw Tommy being similarly set by Sheila. Quickly, Gretchen raised another strand of hair, wound it downward and secured another roller tightly behind the first. Working backwards from the crown, Gretchen set my hair with an almost military precision. She eased my head forward as the rollers were wound and secured. I watched as she placed another row of rollers rapidly and precisely into position. Finished with the crown of my head, Gretchen adjusted the chair slightly and eased my head forward until my chin was touching my chest. Within minutes she had the back of head tightly set on rollers. These were the tightest rollers I had ever felt. Sheila turned to Gretchen as they both continued putting our hair in rollers and commented, "Their permanence turned out beautifully. Once they're set and styled, I think they'll look absolutely darling. Their mothers will be very pleased." "Yes," Gretchen answered, "their hair is coming out wonderfully. Shall we do their manicures while they're under the dryers? Or are you going to wait and do all of that while they're having their mud packs?" I grimaced to myself. This was turning really girlish, more girlish than anything I had undergone at the hands of my mother and aunt. Manicures and mud packs. Ugh. Well, the only relief was that my best pal was going through it with me. But that didn't make it any less feminine. We were in a ladies' beauty shop, having our hair set. Soon we would have on hairnets, our ears covered with those funny little pads, and again be sitting under those big domed dryers. Then we were going to be given manicures and mud masks. Gosh! Well, somehow we'd get through it. Sheila responded, "We'll do their fingernails while their sets are drying. Why don't you do Tommy's manicure and I'll do Peter's? The other treatment we can do while they relax under their facials. I'm going to use the Queen Beauty Mud formula on their faces. That's a nice, rich mask which takes a good while to firm up and work properly, so we'll have plenty of time to work on them. Then we'll finish their faces and their comb-outs at the same time." "That's good," Gretchen said in return. Other treatment? What was that about, I wondered. Queen Beauty mud? A good while to firm up and work properly? We'll have plenty of time. What on earth? What were they going to do to us? Even with my head down, I shot Tommy a glance, but his face said he had no idea either. Goodness, what else had Mrs. Harrison convinced my mom to let these beauticians do to us? As I turned back and looked in the mirror, I saw Gretchen smile at me. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded yes. I thought I heard ladies' voices in the waiting area, but neither Gretchen nor Sheila seemed to notice. Gretchen went on setting my curled locks on rollers. After a few more minutes, with only the right side of my head to be wound on rollers, Sheila interrupted with Gretchen, "Why don't you turn 2 dryers on so that they're warm for our little customers?" Gretchen smiled, excused herself and went over to the row of dryers where she turned 2 of them on. Upon her return, she smiled sweetly at me and quickly finished setting me in rollers. She carefully checked each roller to make sure it was properly fixed to my hair, adjusted and repinned some. She removed the towel and plastic cape, which she replaced with a short, pink nylon garment, reaching to my shoulders. "This is a setting cape, just to protect your clothes. We don't need to keep you in that hot plastic cape while your set dries. Now, I'll get you ready for the dryer." She picked up a can of hairspray, instructed me to cover my eyes with my hands and proceeded to apply a light coating of hairspray to each roller. With that finished, she placed a large pink hairnet over my rollers, which she pulled firmly toward the front and tied securely in a large bow in the center of my forehead. She slipped white ear pads under the net. These encased and protected each ear. They seemed thicker than the ones she had used when my perm was processing. Saying, "Now let's get you under the dryer, sweetheart, and you'll have your nails done," Gretchen led me from the chair over to a dryer. After making sure I was seated exactly in the center of the chair, she lowered to hood over my head. The only sound I could hear was the whoosh of the dryer. I watched as Sheila escorted Tommy over to the dryer at my left. Looking at him in his pink, frilly setting cape, his hair trussed on rollers, hairnet tied with a bow in the very front, his ears enclosed in pads, I realized how very feminine we must look. Looking at us from the shoulders up, we looked like girls having our hair done. Within moments, Tommy was seated beside me, a dryer hood lowered over his head. Sheila wheeled a manicure table in front of my dryer. She seated herself on a short stool on the other side. She said something which I could not hear because of the pads and dryer noise. Realizing that I didn't hear her, she took my hands and dipped my fingers into a bowl of liquid. After a few moments, she took my right hand and began filing the nails lightly with an emery board. I noticed many bottles of various colored nail polish, which made me worried. But I also saw in one corner a bottle marked clear. I figured if she actually polished my nails, it would be with that, like some movie stars I had read about. That would be bad enough, but I figured that when I got home, I could use Mom's polish remover and take off the polish. At this point, the dryer heat, my good lunch and the early start to the day combined to make me doze off. I had no idea how long I slept, but when I awakened I was startled by 2 things almost simultaneously. I was still seated under the dryer, which now felt very hot. First, I noticed that my fingernails were shining with pink nail polish. At the same moment, I realized that our mothers were standing in front of us with Sheila and Gretchen. The 4 women all wore broad, happy smiles. As soon as she saw that I was awake, Sheila came over to me and lifted up the dryer hood. "Relax, honey. Just keep your hands still on the manicure table until your nails dry. Your hair and your nails will be done shortly. Then your moms will explain what they have planned." Before I could say anything in the way of protest or questioning, she lowered the dryer back over my netted hair. My mom smiled sweetly at me. She and Mrs. Harrison and the beauticians turned to each other in animated conversation. I could not hear a word because of the dryer noise and the thick pads over my ears. I turned to my left and saw Tommy in the same situation, his polished fingers spread out in front of him on the manicure table. He glanced back at me, shrugging his shoulders as if to say he had no idea either as to what was going on. I realized again as I looked at my best pal, sitting under a beauty shop dryer, his hair in rollers and a hairnet, his ears covered with pads, a frilly cape around his neck, his nails wet with polish, just how very girlish we must look. I had anticipated that our manicures would include nail polish, but I expected the clear polish that I knew business executives and movie stars got on their nails when manicurists did them in fancy barber shops. Here we were with pink polish on our nails. Pink! And when our hair finished drying, we were going to be given mud packs. And something else? Yes, something else, but what else? I tried to think about what other treatments women received in beauty parlors. I couldn't come up with an answer. I was getting a bad feeling about our situation. Our moms were doing something. The question was, what had them so giddy and smiling so contentedly? What were they doing to us? I wondered. I desperately wished that I could hear what the women were saying. Clearly, not only were we going to receive mud packs, but something else as well. And whatever it was, our mothers were giggling like naughty schoolgirls. About 15 or 20 minutes after I awakened, our hair dryers automatically shut off. Sheila came over to me and Gretchen to Tommy. Sheila lifted up the dryer hood up and patted my roller-covered head. "Okay, honey. Your hair's dry. Bet you're glad to done with that, huh?" she asked as she removed my ear pads. She reached down and gently touched my shiny fingernails. "Good. Your nails are dry as well. Just sit here a minute. Have to do one more thing, then you two have some talking to do with your moms." Sheila walked back to her styling station and picked something up. Tommy and I shot each other glances but still could not figure out what was happening. Sheila quickly returned with 2 large white cotton scarves with tiny perforations all over. She handed one to Gretchen. The beauticians shook them open and placed them over our heads, completely covering our rollers and hairnets. Sheila led us and our mothers into her private office in the rear right corner of the beauty shop. She told our mothers to take as long as they wanted to talk with us. The two of them, looking very serious but also very happy, began to explain what a plan they had made since our home permanence back at the end of March. Throughout our school years, neither Tommy or I were the typical rough and tumble boys who made trouble, nor were we effeminate little sissies that were regularly the target of taunting and teasing. We did well with studies and had friends, which made our mothers happy. My mom's concern was that I, being the only boy and never really knowing Dad who was always busy working and making money, might not fit in well. Mom told me about how she had always wanted another daughter but had a son instead and worried because she felt insecure about raising boys and Dad was never around much. A light began coming on in my young mind about why the home permanence and the regular hair setting. Mrs. Harrison talked about the loss she felt 6 years ago at her husband's sudden death. She too told about how she had always wanted a daughter but had a son instead. She told Tommy and me about how she had relished the early years of Tommy's life when she could dress him up in pretty and frilly things and pretend he was her daughter. She had done that until Tommy had turned 4. When she stopped dressing him in little girl things, she suffered a bit inside over the loss of her pretend daughter. Then, with the death of her husband, she felt really empty. So the day that Peter's Aunt Carol called me about Peter having a permanent while you were there, Tommy, I had this idea about having a daughter again, if just for a little while, she said. When I talked with Rita and found out that she had some of the same feelings, we began to think about having pretty daughters for just a time. You two with your puppet projects and church plays and school plays understand about playing Let's Pretend. You are both very creative and very talented youngsters. So we wanted to ask you two to do a big Let's Pretend favor for your moms. Would do something very special for us? I was wondering and worrying about where this was headed, especially after both moms had said that they really had wanted girls. But Tommy and I both answered that if we could do anything to please them, we most certainly would. As our moms smiled broad smiles, I sensed that we had been set up. Too late to turn back. Here it comes, I thought. Tommy and Peter, would you be your mommy's girls for the summer? Would you play this let's pretend for us? It would make us feel very happy. Would you be willing to do that? No one would ever have to know about this if you didn't want them to know, they said. Our moms explained the conversations they had since our home permanence at the end of March. They had discussed the idea of dressing their boys up as girls in great detail and had long before today agreed that it would certainly help teach us what girls went through, even if only for a little while. They explained that they were doing this to help us develop good character. They said that some famous writers, actors, and even European noblemen were kept in girls' clothes when they were young children. It was common knowledge, they said, that these men had benefited from the experience, and Tommy and I would benefit from wearing girls' clothes also. They thought it important for us to have such a lesson before we started our teenage growth spurt to young manhood. As an added bonus, our mothers would have the daughters they'd always hoped for, on a little trial basis at any rate. They decided it was going to be a fun time converting their sons into a sweet girls for a while. And having the help of professional beauticians was a golden opportunity. To say I was shocked would be a big understatement. I stood there in stunned silence for a few seconds. Before I was able to gather my wits about me, Tommy asked his mom what we would have to do to be their mommy's girls for the summer and how would we keep anyone else from knowing. Mrs. Harrison explained that she had rented a summer cottage at a mountain lake 2 hours drive away from the city. She had been well off financially before she married. The settlement of the accident which had killed her husband along with a large amount of insurance money had made her and Tommy very comfortable. We could be there until it was time to return to school. Tommy and I could be together all summer with no one to bother us. She had told the rental agent that she would be staying there with her daughter and her niece. We could swim, ride horses, play board games, work with our puppets, picnic to our heart's content, play miniature golf, read books, go to a movie, just doing it all while dressed as girls. Peter, your mom and your Aunt Carol can come as often as they like. There is plenty of room. The cottage is in a secluded spot on the lake with its own little beach. No one in the nearby towns knows us. Your mom has not told anyone else, even your sisters. What do you say? A peaceful summer at a mountain lake? A summer as our darling daughters? A summer of the greatest let's pretend? Would you do something very special for us? She asked. Being the obedient sons, and now daughters, that we were, Tommy immediately agreed to her request. I asked my mom when we would begin and if I could stop being her third daughter if I felt that I wasn't comfortable playing this pretend role. She said that we would start now. They had underclothes for us to change into now, and as soon as the beauticians finished our beauty treatments, dresses, stockings and shoes for us to wear for the evening. Mrs. Harrison was taking us all to a nice restaurant for dinner where Aunt Carol would join us for a girls' night out. They had prepared a wardrobe of girl outfits for us. Suitcases were in Mrs. Harrison's car. After dinner, she would take her daughter and niece to a hotel, and early the next morning we would leave for our summer at the lake, as girls. I just ask you to try this for the next 2 weeks. If you don't want to do this pretend after that, I'll bring you home. Is that fair, honey? My mom asked. What could I say? I saw on her face how much this obviously meant to my mom. And a chance to do things with my best friend, all summer, at a cottage, on a lake? How could I refuse? Okay, so doing it dressed as a girl was a big price to pay. But I couldn't say no, could I? And Mom was so reasonable yet so excited. How do you say no, at age 11, to the most important woman in your life, I ask you? Tommy and I immediately got smothered in hugs and kisses. We have an important decision to make now, young ladies, Mrs. Harrison declared. Obviously, you cannot be Peter and Tommy during this time as your mommy's girls. What would you like to be called? Remember, these will be the names you use all summer, the names you'll call each other and which we will call you. Both of you are creative with your puppet plays in naming characters. What character role do you want for yourselves? After a minute of silence, I looked at my mom and asked, "Mom, if I had been born a girl, what would you have called me?" "Did you have a girl's name picked out?" "Why, yes, I did, Peter." "You would have been Brenda, like Brenda Starr in the comic pages." I always read Brenda Starr in the newspaper every day. For some reason, that classy-looking professional woman interested me. If I was going to be a girl, well, I'd be a clever, pretty girl like my heroine. "Okay, I'll be Brenda for the summer," I told Mom. With tears in her eyes and a very big smile on her lips, Mom kissed me again. "You're wonderful, Brenda." Mrs. Harrison turned to Tommy. "Well, darling, what are we going to call Brenda's best friend?" With a certain grin on his face, my friend answered, "I'll be Thomasina." That's a fancy girl's name, yet if anybody calls me Tommy that won't sound strange. Smiling, Mrs. Harrison kissed her daughter and said, "What a wonderful choice, Thomasina. I think that name really becomes you. I might not have thought of it, but it suits my beautiful girl. Now girls, you have to change clothes. We'll help you." Mrs. Harrison took Thomasina into a changing booth in the robing area and my mom led me into another. On a stool, Mom had arranged a set of girls' underwear. I noticed a dress on a hanger and shiny black patent shoes with a low heel on the floor. Once I had removed my clothes, Mom gave a pair of pink panties to put on. She fastened a matching training bra around me and snapped it shut in back. Unwrapping a small package, she produced 2 rubbery but unmistakable small breast forms which she inserted in my bra, explaining that actors use such things in movies and plays. As Mom placed the pads into the bra, she said, "Since you'll be turning 12 this summer, you need a bra to help support your budding breasts. This bra will give you the shape of a 12 or 13-year-old girl." I simply marveled that I suddenly had 2 small mounds protruding from my chest. While not giving me big breasts, I nonetheless saw in the mirror a distinctly feminine form which looked like my sisters had when they started developing bosoms. Next, Mom helped into a white panty girdle which definitely pulled me in. It had garter tabs which Mom explained would hold my stockings, which I wouldn't put on until after my toenails had been done. I gulped. Toenails done? Stockings? Good grief, I was going to end up with polish on my toes as well as fingers. I was going to wear nylons on my legs. Mom completed my underthings with a silky white slip with lace at the top and bottom. I emerged from the booth in my bra, panties, girdle and slip just in time to come face to face with my best pal in the same outfit. As we blushed, our moms helped us into fresh pink smocks which they secured at the back of our necks. They gave us each a pair of white slippers - mules. Mrs. Harrison called them, with very low heels. "All right, girls. You're going to have a facial and a pedicure now. Then, while you're relaxing under your mud packs, we're having our hair set. After all, our new daughters can't look nicer than their moms when we go to dinner," Mrs. Harrison giggled. "Wait here, girls, while I get Sheila." She and Mom walked away and left us staring at each other. We really looked like girls now. Our hair up on curlers and covered with nets. Our fingernails polished. Wearing slips and girl slippers. My mom put me in a bra and a girdle. Thomasina blushed again. "This girdle pinches." "Yeah. I wearing a bra and girdle, too," I confessed. "They're going to paint our toenails, too. Then we have to wear stockings and dresses." "Well, Brenda, at least we're doing this together. And we have all summer to play and do fun things together." "Yep. Not all bad," I conceded. Gretchen and Sheila appeared with our moms. Mrs. Harrison introduced us as Thomasina and Brenda. the beauticians led Thomasina away to a booth in the back of the beauty shop, explaining that just as soon as they started her facial, one of them would come and summon me back. In just a few minutes, Gretchen led me into the larger cubicle at the left rear side of the shop. Thomasina was already reclined in a treatment chair even more elaborate than the ones we sat in to have our permanence. I could only think of us as girls now, head rested on a fancy headrest. A large plastic cape reached from her neck to her knees. Her feet were soaking in a little ceramic tub which sat on the floor. The scent of roses in the water filled the booth. "Well, Brenda," Sheila said, "you can sit on the chair there if you wish and watch while I apply Thomasina's mud pack. Then while Gretchen starts her pedicure, I'll take you into the next booth and apply your mud pack." "Okay, young ladies?" We both just shook our heads yes, still rather speechless at what was happening to us. I watched in wonder as Sheila seated herself behind my friend's head. She opened a very fancy jar and reached in. When she removed her fingers, they were covered with a thick, jet-black cream which she began to apply to Thomasina's neck. As I watched my friend's pale face disappear under the pitch-black cream, I wondered what it felt like and immediately realized that I would soon find out by first-hand experience. My face was about to receive the same facial cream. As she spread the dark clay over my friend's face, Sheila commented, "I think Thomasina and Brenda are lovely names for two lovely young girls. You are going to have a wonderful time this summer." As she commenced to apply a second layer of the beauty cream, Sheila commented, "This mud mask is a wonderful treatment, made by one of the premier cosmetic houses in Europe. Your skin will feel wonderful when we're done with your facials. Now Thomasina, sweetie, you just relax and let this wonderful facial work its magic. This mask takes several minutes to firm up, so don't touch your face or try to talk for the next 10 minutes or so. Gretchen is going to start your pedicure while I take Brenda into the other booth and put her mud pack on. After the mask is firm, it has to be on your face at least 90 minutes. You just relax and enjoy, honey," Sheila said. "Gretchen, I asked their moms about the color of polish and they said we can put frosted pink on their toes. Brenda, come with me please." I shot a final glance at my mud-packed friend and with resignation, followed Sheila into the next booth. At her direction, I sat down in the elaborate chair. She fastened a plastic cape around my neck. She placed a ceramic tub at my feet and lowered them into the warm water. I smelled the strong scent of roses. She lowered the back of the chair until I was in a prone position. I felt the hair rollers dig into the back of my head as she leaned me back onto the headrest. She checked my skin and commented, "You and Thomasina don't need much work. This type of mud pack is just perfect for cleansing and toning your young skins. Once I have applied your mud mask, I'll check on Thomasina. Then you will be ready for me to do your pedicure while you relax." In a moment I could feel the first layer of beauty clay being applied to my neck. This mud pack is a special treat for clients. It is one of the most luxurious facials I offer in my shop. "It will clean and tone your skin wonderfully," Sheila commented. Yuck, I thought, but I could only lay there awaiting my fate. Carefully avoiding my eye area, she applied a liberal coating of the special formulation, which she quickly followed with a second coat so that my face looked like my pal's mud-masked one. No wonder it was called a mud pack. I felt like a ton of this goo was packed onto my face. When she finished, she reminded me, "Now remember, you must keep as still as possible while your mud pack firms up. I'll check on my other little lady while you rest, sweetheart. In a minute or two, I'll start your pedicure. Just be perfectly still for at least 10 minutes. Sheila returned to the booth in several minutes, reminding me again not to talk or touch my face and to remain still. I could feel the mask hardening but had no idea how hard it became until Sheila reached up to see if your mud pack is properly set, young lady. As she patted my enveloped face, I realized how firm it had become. There, that's good, she commented. Remember to keep as still as you can so the mud pack can work, but it is set now. Probably feels a little strange, doesn't it? She asked. Yes, was as much as I could answer with my lips tightly sealed by the 2 layers of beauty cement. I worried that it would take a hammer and chisel to remove my mud pack. I could feel her working on my feet. It was hard to be still. The rollers pressed into my scalp, despite the soft headrest. The mud pack grew increasingly tighter on my face. The girdle was pinching my bottom and my tummy. Eventually, I felt Sheila place wads of cotton between my toes as she explained that this was to keep them separated while she applied polish. I winced as I remembered that the beauticians would put frosted pink on their toes. She seemed to take so long I wondered what she was doing until she explained that I'm applying a base coat, 3 coats of color and a top protective coat so your polish will stay nice and shiny for days. Gee, just what I wanted, nice shiny pink toes for days and days. All right, sweetheart. Your pedicure is done. We have to let your polish dry so you can just relax under your mud pack for 30 or so minutes while I do a roller set on Linda and your mom. You can take a little beauty rest. Now don't go anywhere. And she left the booth. Alone at last, I reached up and touched my face. Oh gosh, was that mud pack firm? No wonder they called it a mask. It was like wearing a Halloween mask. I sat up and looked at my toes. The bright pink color glistened between the white cotton wads. The 2 small mounds of my breasts showed under the plastic cape. I slumped back down. My mom had let me be changed into a girl. Here I was in a beauty shop, wearing girls' underwear, a bra over my breasts and a girdle on my bottom. My permed hair was set in rollers and covered with a hairnet and scarf. My fingers were polished bright pink. My toes were polished bright pink. I was imprisoned in a mud pack. Ugh. It couldn't get worse, could it? Again, I fell asleep as I had under the hot dryer, despite the mud mask, the rollers, and my girdle. When I awakened the next time, Mom was standing beside my chair. She had a pink hairnet over her roller set head and a long plastic cape protecting her clothes. Her face was covered in a dark blue cream. Hi there, my sleeping beauty. Did you enjoy your beauty sleep? I was just enjoying looking at my daughter. You're sweet, honey. Sheila is on her way in to remove your mud pack. I managed to get out of my sealed lips. I thought that we really looked like mother and daughter with our hair in curlers and nets and our faces covered with creams. Sheila entered, smiled graciously at me and Mom and set to work removing my mud pack. As she peeled away the layers of the mask, much more easily than I had expected, to my great relief, the beautician commented to Mom, Mrs. Stowe, I'd like to suggest something else for your daughter before we style her hair and apply her makeup. I grimaced, worried about what else she could do to me. I listened intently from my prone position. Unlike Thomasina, Brenda has a lot of eyebrow growth for a young girl. Would you let me wax those brows while she's in position? That way, she'll look more like a young lady. I wasn't sure what that meant, but before I could ask, Mom said, Sure, Sheila, go right ahead. Just relax, sweetie. You're going to look great, Sheila said. I'm going to use a bit of hot wax to make your eyebrows properly shaped, a little more ladylike. When we're done with you today, honey, you are going to look just darling. I'll do your brows, then we're going to put some makeup on you and Thomasina and comb you out and style your hair. It did not dawn on me what Sheila was about to do. She took a slim wooden stick and told me to close my eyes. I felt warm wax going over part of my brow. She pressed a cotton pad on the right brow, rubbed several times so that it stuck to the warm wax, then she pulled up in one quick motion. I squeaked in surprise. With tweezers she plucked some more brow hairs. I emitted a little grunt of pain. That wasn't too bad, Was it, sweetie? We're going to do the same thing on the left brow. It's tough what we ladies go through for the sake of beauty, but you'll look nice, she explained. She repeated the same procedure on my other brow, using warm wax and tweezing for what seemed an eternity. Again, I squeaked when she pulled off the wax strip. Good girl. All done. So let's go back to the styling chair for your makeup and comb out. I followed Mom and Sheila to the styling chairs and took a seat by Thomasina. Mom looked at Mrs. Harrison and said, poor Brenda had another harsh introduction to beauty rituals. She just had her brows waxed. The four women smiled in commiseration. Oh, you poor girl. Mrs. Harrison said. Welcome to paying the price of looking nice. Your brows do look wonderful, honey. Just look in the mirror. I can't wait to see how pretty you two look when you have some makeup on and your hair has been combed out. You are going to look so darling, she gushed. I stared at my image and saw my brows definitely had the high arch that my sisters achieved on theirs. Before I could get too amazed, I noticed Sheila start to apply makeup to Thomasina and I turned to watch. Now let's get started, ladies, Sheila directed. Being proper young ladies, we want a soft, innocent and totally feminine look for you both. Usually your makeup needs to settle, but for tonight we'll definitely give you girls the glamour treatment. We will start off by using an eyelash curler to bring out the length and curl of your lovely lashes. She used a strange-looking pair of tweezers to curl Thomasina's eyelashes. Next she applied foundation across the forehead, down the center of the nose, across the cheeks in a zigzag pattern and across the chin. She smoothed foundation toward the hairline and gently blended into the skin, including the jawline and neck. After the foundation, Sheila applied powder to the face to set it in place. I've given your mom small compacts for you girls to use tonight in case you need a touch-up. They'll be in your purses along with the other things I'm using on you. Purses? I forgot about that. Good grief. We're going to be girls all right. Sheila applied eyeshadow to Thomasina's lids and brows, followed by a bit of mascara on her lashes and a bit of eyeliner across the upper eye and at the base of the eyelids. Eyebrows were shaped and colored with brow pencil. Each cheek received a bit of rouge. My pal's lips received a coating of pastel peach lipstick. Sheila pressed a tissue over the lips to blot them, then applied a light dusting of pressed powder and more lipstick. What do you think, ladies? Sheila asked. We all agreed that Thomasina looked like a very pretty girl, even though her hair was still in curlers. My 11-year-old pal had disappeared and been replaced by a beautiful girl who looked at least 15 or 16. Wow, I commented, am I going to look like that? You sure are, Brenda. Your turn. Gretchen, take out Miss Thomasina's curlers and start styling her while I do Miss Brenda's makeup. Because Sheila was applying my makeup, I couldn't watch the creation of Thomasina's hairdo. Sheila had started with applying a light moisturizer and then foundation to my face. Next she covered my face with powder in the same shade as the foundation. She used rouge on the cheekbones. My lashes she curled with the metal eyelash curler, then put eyeshadow on my eyelids and black mascara on the upper lashes, used eyeliner and penciled my neatly shaped brows. Sheila had me pucker my lips, applied apricot lipstick, blotted it, pressed on a bit of powder and slicked on another coat of lipstick. The finished face which greeted me in the mirror was that of a pretty teenage girl. I stared first at my carefully made-up face, then watched Gretchen apply a thick coat of hairspray to the glamorous hairdo on my friend's head. Thomasina's hair stood up from the forehead with a row of curls across the brow. Neatly layered curls covered her ears. The back of her head was composed of several rows of curls firmly in place with hairspray. Sheila removed my curlers and began to style my hair while Gretchen styled my mother's hair. Both hairdressers and my mother were ohing and awing at how beautiful my hair looked and how well it really took to setting. Using a brush and rat-tail comb, Sheila shaped and back-combed my hair into a bouncy flip with bangs on my forehead, height on top and a sleek flip at the ends. It looked and felt like my hair had doubled in volume. After a heavy dose of hairspray, she handed me a mirror and turned the chair so I could admire the front and back of my new hairdo. No doubt about. My hair had been done. I looked like an attractive teenage girl. Our moms and Thomasina complimented me. As the final touch, Thomasina and I both were lightly sprayed with scent. It's time to get you dressed. Your moms will help if you need it. When you are all finished, we will be awaiting your presents out in the front, said Sheila with a smile. Once back in the changing booth, Mom helped me put on my beige stockings. She got me into a pretty light green dress and pulled up the back zipper. The shoes came last. Although they had only a 3/4-inch heel, they felt strange. As Thomasina and I walked into the front of the beauty shop with our mothers, Sheila and Gretchen applauded us. What pretty young ladies, they cooed. We both blushed as our moms beamed with satisfaction. Before we left Pearls and Lace Beauty Shop, Mom called Aunt Carol and told her where to meet us for dinner. Sheila and Gretchen said, "Have a great summer, girls." We said we would. As Mom and I entered the back seat of Mrs. Harrison's car, Mom came a quick lesson about being seated like a lady. We went to a very nice restaurant in that part town that Mom and I had never been to before. I felt scared to death that someone would recognize me, or worse yet, recognize that I was a boy in girls' clothes. "Relax, Brenda," Mom said. "Did you look at yourself in the salon mirror when Sheila finished your makeup?" "Sure I did," I replied. "What has that got to do with it?" Mom just smiled and hugged me. "I'm trying to tell you that you make a very cute girl. By merely looking, no one would believe you're really a boy. For this, let's pretend you and Thomasina are in costume and in character. Your voices haven't started to change yet, so you both sound like girls. Relax and enjoy. Watch how the waiters and waitresses here treat you too as young ladies. Now, deep breath. Get in character as Brenda and enjoy the show." An attendant parked the car. At the entrance, Aunt Carol was waiting for us, smiling a mile-wide smile. "Oh, Brenda, you're beautiful, honey. And you, too, Miss Thomasina. What lovely young ladies." We blushed, our mothers beamed. Once inside, Mrs. Harrison said to the maitre d', "I'm Linda Harrison. I have a dinner reservation for 5 people." "Yes, madam." "Your table is ready," the tall, gray-haired man replied. "Would you ladies follow me, please?" This was the most elegant restaurant I had ever seen. The round table was elaborately set, a menu at each place. The man held out our chairs for each one of us. "Enjoy your dinner, ladies." An attractive blonde waitress approached our table. "Good evening, ladies. Welcome to Chez George. You all look lovely. A special occasion this evening?" "In a way," Mrs. Harrison answered. "We're celebrating the end of the school year and honoring our 2 fine young scholars. As a reward for doing exceptionally well, the girls spent a nice afternoon in the beauty salon having their hair and nails done, and I'm treating them to dinner. This is my daughter Thomasina and my niece Brenda. Congratulations, girls, on doing so well. You look lovely. You're a credit to your mothers." Thomasina and I blushed again. "Would you like a beverage while you review the menu?" Mom, Aunt Carol and Mrs. Harrison each ordered a cocktail. Mrs. Harrison ordered a Shirley Temple for Thomasina and for me. When the waitress took our order, she complimented Thomasina and me again on how nice we looked and said what fine young ladies were, our hair so stylish and our dresses so fashionable. Over dinner, Aunt Carol asked us what it felt like to have the works in a real beauty shop. She listened intently to what we said, shaking her head in affirmation, laughing at parts, like our sleeping under the dryers, the tightness of our mud packs, and the shock of my eyebrow waxing. She commented that we would never again take for granted what girls and women do in order to look nice. Every time the waitress came to our table for something, she smiled at Thomasina and me. One time, she teased us about having boyfriends and told our moms to keep their eyes on us. When we all ordered dessert, she said, "As slim as you young ladies are, you can have as much as you want and don't have to worry about your figures." Aunt Carol laughed. "Oh, they're learning. After a big meal like this, they'll be glad to get out of their girdles tonight." Thomasina and I reddened while the adult women just laughed. Our waitress said, "Welcome to young womanhood, girls. Soon enough we all have to be concerned about how we look in a dress and worry about our shape and weight. But I'm guessing you too will have your pretty mother's figures." That was the first time that I participated in such a womanly conversation. I had no idea how women talked among themselves. But my best friend and I were about to spend our whole summer vacation as girls. We would learn a lot about girls becoming young women, girls relating to their mothers, and girls being real pals to each other.